and welcome back to the Reagan Faulkner Show. Now, last week we talked about Mamdani, his election, and many of the policies that he was aiming to put in place. So just to follow up on that, recently the governor of New York actually came out and said that she doesn't support a lot of Mamdani's policies, specifically the increases in taxes and things like that. So a lot of the things that he was elected for, a lot of the things that his supporters were in favor of are actually just not going to happen unless they elect a more socialist governor in midterms. So there's a little bit less that we have to worry about there concerning Mamdani, but in the grand scheme of things, like the rent freezes and all that can still happen. But that's just a little update on what we've seen in the past week. Now, today, I promised y'all a part two, so I want to look more at Mamdani's election, how he got elected, why he got elected, and the national consequences of that election. So first, we're just going to dive right into those consequences and what it means for people like Mamdani getting elected, what that means for the future of the United States as a whole. So it wasn't just Mamdani that was a democratic socialist, first or second generation immigrant coming into America, going into politics. His story was not the only one. He was just the most vocal of them. But in fact, this past election cycle, there were 42 Muslim, Islamic, Arabic individuals who were elected to office across the entire country. And I just want to look into this a little bit more, but when we elect people who are first or second generation immigrants, people who have not been raised in America, who have not been just kind of, for lack of a better word, steeped in American culture, people who really saw America from the 90s to where we are now, they're not loyal to America as a whole, to our institutions from 250 years ago. They have very different worldviews, very different experiences. None of those are necessarily wrong, but they're very different than traditional American values that conservatives want to preserve. I mean, it's in the name conservative. We want to conserve the principles and the policies and the ideologies from 250 years ago for the most part, except for things that were bad and disgraceful, such as slavery, such as some of the terrible working conditions from the early 1900s, late 1800s. We want to preserve the good parts of the American identity from generations and centuries ago. But when we're electing people who are first and second generation Americans, first and second generation immigrants, they haven't been able to just have all of those experiences and learn about all that. It takes so much to learn American culture and to experience it. So that's kind of the first one of those dramatic shifts that we're seeing, is this new wave of electing people that have not consistently been in America and been in American culture for years on end. And it's completely opposite of this America First agenda that we've been hearing about, that we've been talking about, that really got formed with the MAGA agenda back in 2016. This idea of America First, Americans First, domestic before abroad. It really isn't buying into those policies or into that identity that many Americans are holding today. And now let's just look at a quick case study of one of the major consequences gone wrong of electing people who aren't consistently from America, who haven't been raised here and have families here for generations and generations and generations. Deerfield, Michigan. If y'all haven't heard about that, in Deerfield, Michigan, they have a Muslim mayor, a Muslim police chief, and a growing Arab police force. And they have completely gone wayward of traditional American ideals and policies and just the foundations and values that we really hold. So first of all, their mayor has allegedly come out and said that Christians are not welcome in the city, which is just absolutely astonishing and catastrophic in my opinion. As a country, we have a separation of church and state. We have just this idea where anybody can be whatever religion they really want to be. So to have somebody come into a predominantly Christian country as a Muslim and then say that Muslims aren't welcome in their community, or that Christians aren't welcome in their community, that is just kind of gut-wrenching to Americans who have worked to preserve the separation between church and state, who've worked to preserve the ability for people to believe and communicate and say whatever they want and have these First Amendment protections. It's just a punch in the gut to us as Americans who have been here for generations and generations. And then also in Deerfield, Michigan, they have begun a Muslim prayer call about 5 times a day, as goes in the Muslim religion, where the mosques in the city are broadcasting this Muslim call to prayer at each of the 5 intervals that they must do for their religious purposes. And it's so loud that there are literal complaints coming in from other members of the community saying, like, this is so loud, I'm having trouble doing my work, sleeping, whatever they're doing, and that, like, they really would like it to be turned down. Like, again, that's not America. Christians and Jewish people and Hindus, nobody else is really shoving their religious beliefs down anybody's throats. And in the First Amendment, you do have a right to religion, you do have a right to free speech, you do have a right to practice your religion, practice your beliefs, as long as, and this is the key part, as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of anybody else. And when there is a broadcast that's so loud, it's disrupting people's habits, disrupting their sleep, disrupting their work, disrupting their careers, disrupting whatever it may be, that's when things start infringing on other people's rights. And it's not an issue of religious intolerance, it's an issue of other people have a life, and those people need to be able to move on with their life, even if they're not Muslim. It shouldn't be forced on them in a way that is inhibiting other people from doing what they need to do as a part of their everyday life. Also, this might be the most, well, not might be, this is the most frightening. The FBI actually busted a plot, arrested, and charged 3 individual citizens in Deerfield, Michigan, of a suspected terrorist attack that would take place on Halloween. I mean, in this predominantly Muslim community, there were 3 individuals charged and arrested, not total involved, but charged and arrested with enough evidence that there was a planned terrorist attack for Halloween of this year coming out of this predominantly Muslim community. It's not people that are coming to America as immigrants wanting to assimilate into American culture and become more American. They're coming in and trying to bring their way of life and not even merge it in kind of a merged assimilation area where people can benefit from both cultures. They're wanting to come in and create entire communities like that of which they came. It's frightening, it's insane, it's un-American, it's definitely not America first. It is just a complete and utter 360 turn from where we have been as a country for generations and where our values lie. There is an invasion of foreign groups and personnel into the U.S. I mean, we've been seeing it for 4 years, quite obviously, with our unrestricted, completely wide open border under the Biden administration, where we didn't know who was coming in, whether they were South American or whether they were coming in from other countries, traveling through our southern border and had hate in their hearts for America and wanted to infiltrate America to do us harm. Like, we don't know who those people were, but they came in and now they're just floating around in America, in Deerfield, Michigan, and places like that, in these sanctuary cities, preparing to do harm to America. And obviously the Trump administration has been doing a great job with deportations and finding and identifying these people, but there are so many. No matter how good of a job they do, there's going to keep being risks of attacks, of situations of people infiltrating our government, whether Mamdani is like an operative or not. I doubt that he is. I'm not trying to go into any conspiracies like that, but there are people like that that have come into this country. Like, there are people that want to do us harm that have come across these open borders for the last 4 years. And then I just found this out, which was fascinating, but the Biden administration created an entire task force to combat Islamophobia in the U.S. And I don't think a lot of people are actually Islamophobic, homophobic, transphobic, racist, any of the phobics and ists that people, want to call conservatives. I don't think very many people actually are, but I think that there's a degree of uncertainty and of questioning that we as Americans ought to have when we see so many people coming into our country illegally, when we see so many people that are first or second generation immigrants running for office. I think there's a degree of uncertainty that as Americans we're allowed to have without being accused of being racist or being Islamophobic or being any of those labels that we've been given by the left. And then even while researching this episode, trying to understand how many people came across the border, how many were Muslims, how many different races, I guess you can say, different beliefs of people have been running for elections and winning, and kind of this idea of the US being invaded and controlled from within. No articles on it that I could find. I'm using Google Chrome. Maybe I would do better using DuckDuckGo or using a VPN or something like that, but it's complete just articles about Islamophobia, rising intolerance against Arab communities. I mean, it's really odd that when you try to look these things up and learn about them, that they are just completely blocked from being able to be researched and then replaced with the general narrative that the media wants to push right now. And then we also see the continued temporary protection status of many foreign groups like Somalia, like Haiti, and many of these groups have been getting reapproved for this status since 1999. Things in their countries more than likely have figured themselves out, have become a little bit more stable. Maybe not in Somalia. I know Haiti's definitely still having some issues, but we see these TSPs. I'm sorry, I was going to say TPSs. I was going to say TSAs. That's my bad. But we keep seeing these continued TPSs for different groups across the nation. And again, when America is the only person that is helping other countries that are in war, other countries that are in harm, that are providing sanctuary and asylum, that's again not putting America first, and it's going to end up harming our nation, harming our economy, continuing to harm the housing crisis. There's just so much wrong with it. While I firmly believe that America should help other countries, we need to put America first at this moment in time. And people like Mamdani are coming in, people like Ilan Omar, like Saikat Chakrabarti. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. We talked about him a few episodes ago. When we let people in and then they run for politics and they win, we really do risk losing American culture and American values and the traditional American way of life that has been time honored for 250 years. And we also are giving people power that don't have an objective loyalty to this nation. I mean, if you're somebody whose family came in on the Mayflower, then obviously you are going to have an invested objective loyalty to the United States. You've been here since 1620. But if you got here 20 or 30 years ago, or you're the first generation to be raised here and you grew up in a family that didn't speak English, that always talked about past culture, you're not going to have this objective loyalty to the United States. You're going to have a 50-50 split of loyalty between your homeland, your ancestry, your culture, and that of America where you grew up. And it's really just a huge risk for the nation and for our way of life and for our traditions and our values. So how did this happen? We've talked about the consequences of it, what's at risk if it keeps happening, and kind of, I guess, where it came from with immigration and with this temporary protected status and things like that. But how did Mamdani win? How did he become the Democratic frontrunner? Somebody so radical and socialist. I mean, how did we even get to this place as America? Well, Mamdani secured his nomination through extremely young, extremely Democratic voters. And it was a very, very high turnout of voters that don't normally come out to election, that 18 to 28, 18 to 30-year-old range of just extremely young and now vocal voters. And it begs the question, why are they so enthralled by Mamdani? Well, the American youth are disappointed in the future and they feel that prospects are extremely bleak. If we look at economic trends and they continue, young Americans like myself and like my Gen Z counterparts likely won't be able to buy a home as nice as our parents live in at their age. So my parents are in their 50s and they have an extremely nice house. In my 50s, I probably won't be able to afford something like what they afford because of economic trends, rising housing prices, the housing crisis, all of those things. We likely won't be able to provide our children with the lifestyles that we were able to grow up with. And this is just because of the rising cost of living and oversaturated job market and just general inflation that has happened post-COVID. In fact, according to a recent article from Realtor.com, the average first-time homebuyer today is 40 years old. I mean, can y'all believe that? 40 years old is the average first-time home buyer, not just the average home buyer in general, But first-time home buyer, I'm 21. That means that if the average continues and stays on par, which likely it's, going to increase, then I won't be buying a home until for another 19 years. That's insane. That's basically my entire lifetime minus 2 years. Like, I'm going to have to live double before I can even afford to buy my own house. I think that that's insane. And that's definitely not the American dream that we were all promised when we were born, when we were told you can be whatever you want in America, go to college, go grow up, get a degree, get a career, you can have anything you want, you can have a family. That's not the promise that we were told by our older counterparts. And many people my age find this extremely disheartening. And then going back to the housing thing and going back to illegal immigration under the Biden administration over the past 4 years, that contributed so much to our housing crisis. When you have hundreds of thousands of people coming into a country and you don't have the infrastructure for them because you didn't plan for them, then obviously there's going to be a housing crisis. Obviously there's going to be inflated rents. Obviously there's going to be just rising housing costs in general. I mean, it's supply and demand. We didn't have enough supply for hundreds of thousands of brand new humans that are able to buy a home, that are old enough to buy a home, that are under or over the age of 18. So when you don't have the supply, and then you have tons of Gen Z Americans coming of age, and you have Gen X and millennial people trying to buy homes, then there's just not enough supply, and everything goes up in cost. Just all of our housing has gone up in cost, not just as a result of that. It is definitely a multifaceted issue, but it's definitely contributed to it for sure. I mean, how could it not? And then jumping back, we're kind of all over the place today, but going back to why people, young people wanted Mamdani, why they felt called to him. Well, the promise that a college education was going to reap huge incomes and huge benefits for Americans, it turned out to be a lie. And now many Americans are going to blue-collar jobs. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the United States. And again, young people feel betrayed, they feel lied to, and they're looking to Mamdani, this idealistic, young, authentic character who has answers. They're not good answers, but they're answers, and many young people would rather have a bad answer than no answer at all. And just this entire kind of college lie, in my opinion, it has really left millennials and Gen Z with so much crippling student debt, and they have no plan for how to get out of it. Again, another article, a Fortune article, was explaining that while 40% of millennials graduated from college with a full-time job lined up, so when they graduated, they had already contracted a job that they would go to straight out of college, only 12% of Gen Z students have that. Only 12% of Gen Z students have a job lined up for when they graduate. And it's extremely discouraging when you've spent 4 years working extremely hard to get a degree and you can't get a job. And again, people are looking to Mamdani. He has answers. He has reasoning for why you don't need to work as hard, why things can be cheaper. Allegedly, they won't be, but he's giving people what they want to hear. And it's just the wrong answer. But another proof to kind of the challenges that Gen Z are facing and why they're attracted to Mamdani, Resume Builder recently released a survey where they polled 1,400 Gen Z adults, and 42% of that 1,400 are actively pursuing a blue-collar job and gaining skills in a specific trade. But many of these 42% are college graduates. Many of these people went to college, took out a loan, got debt, came out, tried to get a job, and realized that their degree is just absolutely useless. And it didn't really go into what those degrees were. Personally, I'm going to argue that a lot of them probably were useless degrees, because I know a lot of people in my generation, and specifically a lot of millennials, went to college and just got degrees in just anything, underwater basket weaving. I mean, just completely useless things. And for that, college isn't a scam. You should have gotten a degree in something that would actually be useful. But for the people that did get a useful degree, this is heartbreaking. This is devastating. The World Innovative Sustainable Solutions shows that average student debt per person per student is $40,800, with a total national student debt, get this, of $1.79 trillion, with a T, $1.79 trillion spread across 45.6 million borrowers. That is an insane number, y'all. $1.79 trillion in student debt across our country is just mind-boggling. And then another issue that young Americans and Americans in general are having when trying to look for a job is the use of the H-1B visas. They're bringing in employees from outside the country for 3-year periods of times that are renewable, and just stripping Americans, hardworking, college-educated Americans, from jobs that would be beneficial, that would be nice, that would be just a dream come true. They're bringing in people from outside of America, and they have to keep them for 3 years, and then they can renew that while these people try to achieve citizenship. And going back to our immigration, this is bringing in people from other cultures, with other worldviews, with other experiences that align with maybe some of these more radical first, second generation immigrant views that people like Mamdani hold. Actually, a different study, I don't have it pulled up right now, but it showed that the majority of people that were in support of Mamdani and voted for him had only lived in New York City for 5 to 7 years. And that the majority of people who'd lived in New York City for a long time actually had no interest in Mamdani. They wanted Cuomo. They wanted somebody different. They didn't want Mamdani. They knew that his policies were going to fail the city. In fact, Mamdani pulled the worst with the poorest and the wealthiest New York City residents, and he only pulled the best with that middle income group between poor and wealthy, this middle class group of Gen Z and millennial residents that felt like this system had failed them. They're looking for justice. They're looking for vindication through socialism, through taxing the wealthy, in order to get what they believe is their fair share, in order to feel justified and enabled after their, what they believe was their unfair college experience, or their unfair education, or just the unfair economic state of the United States. Specifically, they feel entitled to the wealth of older Americans that they believe were part of the lie and part of the failure of the system. And unfortunately, it is socialist policies like Mamdani's that have gotten us here. It is raising the minimum wage across the entire nation, which is pushed for by Democrats and pushed for by socialists. It is increased tax burdens, pushed for by the Democrats, by the socialists. Rent freezing, public programs funded by taxpayers, like Mamdani's universal child care and like his free public bus system. And it's just also increased government regulation on businesses. People don't want to operate businesses if they feel like the government's always hovering over them. It's just more liability for a business owner. And it's just becoming more of a burden in general to own a business, just completely in general. If there's a $30 minimum wage, which is what Mamdani is supporting in New York City, if there's just over-regulation, if there's increased taxes, it's a burden to grow a business, to work harder, to hire more people, to pay more taxes, and then to net the same income at the very end. Why would you do that? You wouldn't. So of course people aren't hiring. They don't want to grow their businesses because it's a pain and because they don't get anything out of it. We need to incentivize our business owners in order to stimulate our economy, in order to hire young people out of college. We don't need to punish them. And additionally, getting into more of a philosophical view of what's happening in our country, we have lost an objective moral and ethical code in our country. And people are looking for meaning in social justice instead of looking for meaning in religion, family, and just trying to live life for a bigger purpose than your own. In recent years, we've seen this ambiguous call for human rights and equity and inclusivity, but there's no detailed goal, there's no detailed meaning in that. And we've seen it in Mamdani saying that housing is a human right. Like, is housing a human right the way that we think about it in America? The right to a climate-controlled 1,200 square foot metropolitan apartment? That is not a universal human right. Yes, everybody deserves to have somewhere to live, but to have a luxury Manhattan apartment, a rent-frozen apartment in the Bronx, I don't think that's a human right. When we look at third world countries, the people that have housing there, they live in shanties and they're happy. They live in tents and they're happy. In Africa, they have these little tribes with tents or shanties and they go out and they dance and they're happy. They don't have a 1,200, 1,400 square foot 5th, 6th, 7th story New York apartment. That is insane to say that everybody deserves that and it should be free. You can go live in cheaper areas of the United States and have a small apartment for maybe $700 a month where it's not overinflated because you're living in a metropolis. We've also culturally, philosophically, we've seen a rise in hookup culture as many young people want to celebrate and pursue independence rather than settling down, dating to marry, desiring a family at a young age. And this is just also creating an issue when you see Mamdani being eccentric and authentic, and you see the rise in hookup culture and the rise of social justice. It's just kind of pushing this subjective morality of, okay, well, am I a Christian that supports Christian values? Am I not necessarily atheist, but have I not found my religion? Do I just believe in kind of being transcendental, floating around out there, doing what's right? There's no objective morality in our country anymore. People don't know where to look or what to look for in candidates. And that's why Mamdani won. He's authentic, he's idealistic, he's young, and right now, voters care more about being relatable to their candidates than they do about actual decent ideas. They care more about this authenticity and throwing out ballpark solutions to see if they stick, even if they're bad, which many of Mamdani, honestly, all of Mamdani's policies are absolutely terrible. But people are going to show up because he's giving an answer. Where when we look at the Republicans, they just say, vote for me and it'll get better. We'll stop the woke left. Like, that's not necessarily an answer. Mamdani's answers are concrete. They're bad, but they're concrete, and they're something that people can get behind. And also, people don't vote based on morality anymore. Look at Jay Jones. Jay Jones said he wanted his opponent's children to die, and he got elected. That's insane. But he showed up. He showed out. He was a Democrat, and somehow he got elected. He appealed to young voters. He appealed to Democrats, even though he was completely lacking of morals, because we don't have an objective morality anymore and people don't seem to care, and it's devastating as a country. But as conservatives, we have to look past all this. We have to analyze it. We have to review it. We have to understand it. It's crucial to understand it, or else we are going to lose in the midterms. But we have to look at it. We have to understand it. We have to have a plan in place. And we have to stand up for America first and America only right now. It is America first and it is America only. Those are the policies that we need to look at, because as a domestic nation, we are in crisis. We are trying to kill each other. Look at Charlie Kirk. We are trying to kill each other. We are trying to fight with each other. There's infighting in the Democratic Party. There's infighting in the Republican Party. Just everybody's fighting. Everybody's stressed out. Nobody knows what's happening. And we cannot go and get involved in other politics and try to solve other people's problems until we can solve our own. It's kind of like when you look at your friend who has the most dramatic life that you've ever thought of, and you just look at her and you're like, oh my gosh, that person is an utter and complete train wreck. I think it's a really good idea for me to ask them advice for my life. Nobody would do that, but that's what America's doing. America is just an absolute train wreck at home, and we're trying to go get involved in other countries' lives like we know what's going on and we know what's best. We don't. We don't know what's best. We don't know what's going on. We are a train wreck. We are that traumatic friend whose life is falling apart, and we need to just introspect, look at ourselves, and be like, ooh, we got some stuff that we need to work on before we can start giving other people advice and helping other people. We need to do America first and America only. And also, it's not our job to be the protector of every single migrant group, every single nation seeking asylum, every single marginalized community. There are over 150 other countries out there that can help too. America doesn't need to bear that burden. We're not the leader of the friend group that needs to help every single person in our grade or in our class. If you're thinking about it from a high school perspective, there are so many other countries that can help kind of dilute the situations globally, that America can take a moment to step back, introspect, work on ourselves, and then go back out into the global atmosphere. Not saying that we can never help other countries again, but right now we really need to focus on ourselves. We have this duty to put America first. We have this duty to put Americans first, especially when we see how much we are struggling economically, morally, politically, and culturally. It's only when we can sort out our domestic problems and solve them and move forward that we can actually be of benefit to anybody else in our globe, anybody else in our world. But until we do that first, we can't help anybody else. And if we don't do that, if we don't fix our country from within, then we're going to end up at a point where we can't return. We have a duty to restore and preserve traditional American values, those that were cemented in our society 250 years ago, those that we think about when we think of the 1950s, and those that came around again after the counterculture revolution of the 60s and Reagan era politics in the 1980s. Those are the morals and the values that we need to pursue as a country and restore before we can do anything outside of America first. Nuclear family, objective morality and ethical behavior, strong Christian beliefs, the founding religion that our nation was built out of and from where many of our laws derived. We have to return to that. We have to support candidates that are authentic and are charismatic, like Mamdani, but also those that are unapologetically Christian, in support of returning America to her former values, her former foundation, and people that will provide objective plans and strategies and solutions that young people can get behind and that young people can support and that young people can research the policy and say, yeah, that's actually a good idea. Unlike Mamdani's policies that literally I don't know if any young person researched and they're destined to fail. Republicans need to put out policies that will work and that are objectively just a straightforward policy that people can look at and say, yes, I support it, or no, I don't. For Gen Z and Gen Alpha listeners, y'all have a responsibility too. Y'all need to go out into your communities, your high schools, your colleges, your workplaces, anywhere you can think of, and share these values too. Start clubs, like I've been saying, start clubs, lead clubs, get involved. Run for student government. Most student governments are just completely liberal to their core. Go into your student governments and spread your conservative ideas. Talk to your peers. Get involved. Don't be afraid to repost things on social media. Share things on social media. Say things on social media. Be involved. Speak out. Use your voice. Go to GOP meetings and speak up and get involved. Meet other adults. They have internship opportunities. They want to mentor you. They're not scary. They genuinely want to help you. Go to those meetings and learn. Volunteer. Write. Many of these places have op-eds. Write for them. Show them that you're ready to take the torch and that you're ready to carry the torch and move the conservative movement forward. And also, find conservative news outlets where you can speak and write and get involved in, because our nation's downfall is going to be through media. We need more independent journalists. We need more conservative reporting because our media is completely liberalized. It has been completely taken away from conservatives and it's completely biased. We need more independent journalists. We need more young reporters getting involved in changing the narrative and speaking the truth. Like I've said in almost every single episode, the time to be silent is over. As Christians and as conservatives, we have a duty to stand up for what is objectively right, objectively true, and objectively moral. If we don't, our society is at risk to falling subject to other politicians like Mamdani, like Ilhan Omar, like Psycat trying to go out for Nancy Pelosi's spot. They will manipulate an apathetic youth that is depressed about their current economic situation, that is worried about their future, and that is absolutely hopeless. They're going to use faulty logic, faulty socialist policies that promise things that are only going to leave Americans more empty than before, and that will crumple our entire economy, our entire culture, and our entire nation as we know it. Americans, conservatives, Christians, and Gen Z, Gen Alpha, we need to stand up, speak out, be bold, and tell the truth, or else our nation is going to fall apart. And most importantly, we need to put America first and America only until we can solve our issues domestically. And then we can reevaluate going back into the global sphere and trying to get involved in other things. But until that point, America first, America only, and that's the only way that we're going to save our country from destruction from within. Thank y'all so much for joining me on today's episode of the Reagan Faulkner Show. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed today's content and you've been enjoying the content from the past few months. If you want more, remember to check us out on socials. We're on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at the Reagan Faulkner Show and the Wilmington Standard. And if you want more, check out our websites, the Wilmington Standard and ReaganFaulkner.com. Thank y'all so much, and I'll see you next week.